My name is Juliet Vaughn, and I walked into my sister's wedding alone. Completely alone. Not because I didn't have someone to bring, but because I wanted to remember what it felt like to stand tall without anyone shielding me. That moment, that walk. It was like stepping into a courtroom where everyone had already decided I was guilty of being a woman past 30, unmarried, and too successful for her own good. As I entered the grand ballroom, heads turned, mostly for the wrong reasons. I caught whispers. I saw the subtle smirks from my sister's new in-laws. The women leaned toward each other, eyes scanning my dress, my hands, and the obvious absence of a ring. One of them muttered loud enough for the people behind her to hear, "Poor thing, still can't find anyone to bring." Vanessa, my sister, didn't even glance my way. She was too busy posing, all teeth and diamonds, next to the groom and his very proud family. And I wasn't part of the display. I was the afterthought they hoped would blend into the back row. I could have left. I should have, maybe. But something in me said to stay, to face every mocking stare without flinching. Then something strange happened. An older man seated at the center table stood up slowly. His hair was silver, his presence unmistakably commanding. I recognized him from headlines. Edward Sinclair, the groom's uncle, a man with more corporate power than most governments. He looked straight at me, and then he bowed. A full, deliberate bow, right there, in front of everyone, and in that instant, every sneer, every whisper, every judgment in the room stopped cold. Growing up in the Vaughn household was like living on a stage you never auditioned for. My sister Vanessa was the star from the moment she could walk. Blue-eyed, golden-haired, effortlessly charming. She was the kind of child relatives fawned over at barbecues, while I, with my serious eyes and endless questions, was gently told to let Vanessa have her moment. I learned early that being quiet was easier than explaining myself. My world was numbers, ideas, inventions. I took apart the microwave when I was 10 and built a self-timing oven by 14. While Vanessa practiced cheer routines, I studied advanced calculus under my blanket with a flashlight. My parents didn't discourage me exactly. They just didn't understand me. "You'll grow out of that tech stuff," my mom said once, right before grounding me for skipping a school dance to attend a robotics camp. Vanessa was rewarded for being pretty. I was tolerated for being strange. By the time we reached adulthood, the gap between us had grown into a canyon. She married young, first love, big white wedding, house in the suburbs. It didn't last, neither did the second one. But the third? Logan. He was a different tier. His family owned land, business chains, and connections that turned heads at the country club. Vanessa saw in him not just love, but legacy. And as always, our parents were thrilled. They hosted dinners, gushed to neighbors, printed new family portraits. My name never came up. I was invited to the wedding because, well, I am her sister. But I was warned, don't make it about you, as if I ever had. I booked a flight, RSVP'd for one, and cleared my schedule. I didn't have the time, but I went. Not for them, but for myself. The morning of the wedding, my mother called just to remind me not to wear anything too loud or too businessy. "You're not presenting at a summit, Juliet," she said, laughing. "This is a family event. Try to blend in, okay?" I smiled through the phone. "Sure, I'll do my best." Of course, I didn't blend in. I wore black, clean lines, no sparkles, my hair in a low knot, minimal jewelry. I looked like myself. And I suppose, in a room designed to spotlight Vanessa, looking like myself was already too much. I arrived on time. Alone. I caught the looks, some surprised, some amused. Vanessa's new in-laws gathered near the altar, sipping champagne and throwing glances my way. One of the aunts nudged another and whispered, "Is that the one who's single?" With the same tone one might use for unemployed or recently paroled. I didn't flinch. I've built startups under pressure no one here could fathom. But I'd be lying if I said it didn't sting. There's a particular kind of ache that comes from being alien in your own family, like you're the ghost at the banquet table. Vanessa walked past me during the pre-ceremony photos. She didn't even stop. "Hi, Juliet," she said quickly, not waiting for a response. So I found my seat, quietly, alone, just like they expected me to. Except what none of them expected was Edward Sinclair. The ceremony itself was standard, overproduced, expensive, curated for social media. Logan and Vanessa said their vows beneath a floral arch the size of a carport. There were drone cameras, a string quartet, and a flower girl flown in from some family friend's child modeling agency. It was the kind of display that screamed perfection, right down to the guests selected for symmetry in the aisle seats. I stayed quiet, clapped politely, smiled when expected. It wasn't until the reception that the real show began. The venue had been transformed into a glittering evening affair, chandeliers, signature cocktails, and monogrammed napkins everywhere. The guests were assigned to long banquet tables, arranged like corporate hierarchies. I was placed near the back, flanked by two distant cousins, who both seemed shocked I hadn't brought a +1. "I figured you'd have someone by now," one of them said, stirring her martini with a gold cocktail pick. "A woman like you, all accomplished." It was meant as a compliment. The pause between her words made it anything but. Vanessa was seated up front with Logan's family. Her in-laws hovered around her like she was a prize they'd just secured at auction. The mother-in-law, Gloria, had a face that didn't move when she smiled, likely the result of a good surgeon. She hadn't spoken to me directly, but I caught her glancing over several times. Once, she leaned into another guest and said, "She's the sister, right? The one who's always working." They laughed. Not loudly, just enough. I excused myself, headed toward the bar. I was halfway through a ginger ale when I saw Vanessa walking toward me. Her smile was tight. "I just wanted to check in," she said. "Make sure you're okay." "I'm fine." "You seem, I don't know, distant." I blinked. "Vanessa, we haven't had a real conversation in 5 years." She gave a little laugh, the kind that begged forgiveness without saying the words. "Well, you're here now, that counts," I almost replied. Almost asked if she even knew where I lived now, what I did. But I didn't. What would be the point? She was already gone before I could say anything. I turned back to my table. That's when I heard them again. Logan's uncle and cousin, sitting not far behind me. "Pretty, but cold," one said. "You can tell she's one of those women who marries her career." "Probably expects us to applaud her for showing up alone," the other added, chuckling. I stood still. For a moment, I considered walking out. I had my coat. My car wasn't far. I could disappear, leave them with their champagne and their self-satisfaction. I owed no one here anything. But then came the pause. That subtle shift in the air. From the main table, a chair scraped back. Slow, purposeful. I turned. Edward Sinclair was rising to his feet. He wasn't flashy like the rest of the family. No polished cufflinks, no exaggerated tan, just a tailored navy suit, silver hair swept back, and eyes that belonged to a man who saw everything without needing to comment. The room quieted. He took a step forward, past Logan and Vanessa, past Gloria, who looked suddenly unsure. And then, right there, he bowed. A clean, full bow, formal, unmistakable, the kind of gesture reserved for people you respect. Or fear. Gasps. A few camera shutters clicked. Someone dropped a fork. I didn't move. I couldn't. Edward straightened and walked to me. "Miss Vaughn," he said, voice low but clear. "It's a privilege to finally meet you. Your keynote at the Zurich summit changed how we handle tech transitions across 3 subsidiaries. I owe you a thank you." I felt every eye in the room shift, recalculating, reweighing. The woman they had written off was now being honored by the most powerful man at the wedding. I smiled then, small, reserved, deliberate. "Thank you, Mr. Sinclair," I said. "It's mutual." For the first time all night, the room wasn't laughing. It was listening. Edward Sinclair didn't return to his seat right away. Instead, he gestured to the nearest waiter, requested a glass of club soda, and asked if I would mind walking with him for a moment. I said yes, not because I was flattered, but because I could sense the ripple that moment had caused, and I wanted it to settle exactly the way it should. We stepped out onto the venue's stone terrace, away from the staring eyes and whispered questions. Edward moved slowly, but with the calm assurance of a man used to people waiting for him. "I meant what I said in there," he began. "I recognized you the moment you entered." "That's funny," I replied, "because most of your family didn't seem to." He chuckled. "They wouldn't. They only know what they've been told. Vanessa's family, correct? They've always struck me as focused on surface value." I didn't answer that. I didn't need to. Edward continued, "3 years ago, your firm launched the integration model for decentralized AI data recovery. My company, Winchester Group, was set to invest $180 million in a competitor. But your presentation in Zurich changed everything." I blinked. "That wasn't public information." "It wasn't, but I make it my business to know who's actually changing the world behind the scenes." I studied him. His eyes weren't just watching. They were weighing. "I assume you didn't mention this to Logan," I said. Edward smiled faintly. "Logan barely knows how to check his own email. He's a decent enough boy, but he inherited everything. He's never built anything. You, Miss Vaughn, built from the ground up." That phrase stuck with me. Because he was right. While Vanessa curated her image, I was building systems, pitching to investors, eating cheap takeout in rented offices. I was up at 3 a.m., writing code with no health insurance and no guarantee the next round of funding would land. I didn't just survive the market, I shaped parts of it. But to my family, that wasn't impressive. It wasn't visible. It wasn't photogenic. Back inside the ballroom, the atmosphere had changed. People who had spent the evening dismissing me now shifted in their seats. A few even stood when I returned, unsure of the proper response. Gloria looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. Logan was pale. Vanessa was furious. She approached as I sat down. "What was that about?" she hissed, the polite smile frozen across her face. I looked up at her, calm, cold. "That," I said, "was someone recognizing what you never did." Her jaw clenched. "You couldn't let me have one day, could you?" I almost laughed. "One day? Vanessa, you've had a lifetime. All I did was show up." She didn't answer. She turned and walked away, heels clicking too fast, bouquet trembling in her hand. The speeches began shortly after. Toasts, jokes, anecdotes. I stayed silent. Edward remained seated at my table, offering quiet remarks now and then, most of which went over the heads of everyone else. Then came the final toast. Logan's father. He rambled through the usual: love, marriage, family. But at the end, he made the mistake of glancing toward me. "And of course," he said, raising his glass, "to all the family members who joined us tonight, even those who prefer the boardroom to the ballroom." There were a few chuckles. Edward didn't laugh. He set down his drink and stood once more. "I'd like to add something to that," he said. "It takes very little talent to inherit wealth. It takes even less to marry into it. But the woman sitting beside me tonight, Juliet Vaughn, has done neither. She's created value where there was none. She's earned respect in rooms none of you will ever be invited into. So, if we're raising glasses tonight, mine is to her." The room went silent again, and this time, no one dared look amused. When Edward made that toast, I didn't smile. I didn't look around for validation or acknowledgement. I kept my gaze steady on the table in front of me, one hand resting on the stem of my glass, the other still. There's something more powerful than being praised. It's being understood. And in that moment, I knew someone in this room finally saw me. But it wasn't my family. They still shifted in their seats, avoided eye contact. Vanessa looked like she wanted to scream, but was too afraid to ruin her wedding photos. My parents were frozen, both clinging to polite expressions that didn't reach their eyes. They didn't know whether to feel proud or ashamed. I could see it, my father trying to remember what I'd told him 5 years ago about my business. My mother recalling that article someone forwarded her, but she never read. They had spent so long reducing me to a cautionary tale. Don't be like Juliet. She's too cold, too ambitious, too alone. that they couldn't recalibrate fast enough now that the world was applauding, but I wasn't there for their applause. Truth is, for years I had carried the weight of wanting them to see me, wanting my mother to brag about me like she bragged about Vanessa's handbags, wanting my father to ask me about my latest project instead of whether I had finally met someone. I wanted them to care, but on their own terms, not out of obligation or embarrassment. Eventually, I stopped trying. I worked, I traveled, I failed, succeeded, failed again. I lived a life with edges, with risk, with meaning, and in doing that, I stopped waiting for their approval. This wedding was supposed to be another chapter in their curated family story, the beautiful daughter marrying into wealth, the other one attending in black like a ghost from a different book. But I'm not a ghost. I'm the architect of my own story. And if they couldn't see that, I was done handing them the blueprint. Later that evening, after the music resumed and the noise returned, my mother approached me. Her steps were hesitant, the way you walk across a frozen lake you're not sure will hold. "You look beautiful tonight," she said softly. "Thank you," I replied. She paused, then added, "We didn't know about all that. About Zurich? About Mr. Sinclair?" "I know," I said. "We're proud of you, Juliet." I met her eyes. "Why now?" She blinked. "Excuse me?" "Why are you proud now, Mom? Because someone powerful said I mattered? Or because you finally believe I do?" She didn't answer, just reached for my hand and squeezed it, as if that would undo decades of silence. I let her hold it for a second. Then I let go. As I turned to leave the reception, Vanessa caught up with me. "I didn't know he knew you," she said. "Uncle Edward. I had no idea." "You never asked," I replied. "About my life, my work, anything." "That's not fair." "No, it's just accurate." She looked away. "You always made me feel like I wasn't enough." I tilted my head. "Funny. You and Mom always made me feel like I was too much." That was the last thing we said to each other that night. I left alone, just as I had arrived. But this time, not a single person laughed. I didn't go back inside. While the party stretched late into the night, people dancing, glasses clinking, laughter echoing in that manufactured fairy tale, I stood outside beneath the darkening sky and watched the lights flicker across the windows. For the first time, I didn't feel like the outsider. I felt like the one who had left the stage before the show turned tacky. A few guests passed by me on their way to the valet. A couple of them nodded, overly polite. One man, a junior executive from a firm I'd acquired years ago, approached me nervously and said, "I didn't know you were that Juliet Vaughn." I just looked at him. "You still don't." He walked off with his wife, fumbling an apology. Edward Sinclair came out a little later, his hands in his coat pockets, his tie slightly loosened. He didn't speak for a moment, just stood beside me. The silence was surprisingly comfortable, more honest than anything said in that room. "I wasn't trying to make a scene," he said finally. "I know," I replied. "You were trying to make a correction." He smiled. "Some illusions deserve to be broken." Then he offered something I didn't expect, a partnership. Not just a courtesy or favor, but a concrete opportunity. He told me about a new initiative he was launching. He wanted my insight, my name on the founding charter, and more than anything, he wanted someone who didn't just know how to build, but how to rebuild from nothing, with vision and clarity. I didn't answer right away, not out of pride, just reflection, because for the first time in a very long time, I realized I had a choice, one not shaped by resentment, but by self-respect. Eventually I said, "Let's talk Monday." He nodded once and left. That was it. No fanfare, no fireworks, just mutual respect sealed in quiet. I drove home alone that night with the music off and the window half down. The wind was cold against my face, but I welcomed it. It reminded me that I was real, that I was here not because someone allowed me to be, but because I carved out a space that couldn't be ignored and never needed their approval to exist. I never got the kind of family that clapped for me at graduations or showed up at product launches, but that night, I stopped needing them to. I stopped trying to earn what they were never willing to give. And maybe that's the lesson I didn't know I needed to learn. Sometimes the most powerful moment isn't when the world finally applauds you. It's when you realize you don't need them to. And that freedom, quiet, unsentimental, absolute, was the most valuable thing I had ever claimed for myself.